Thanks, Karine.
Yep.
If the president thinks that Congress must act immediately to end this epidemic of gun violence, is he going to bring any of the key players from Capitol Hill to the beach with him tonight?
Oh, okay. So I don't have.
Wasn't a big part of candidate Biden's whole thing that he knows how to get things done.
He
with
does. He
Congress?
does. I mean, he's beaten the gun lobby before. He has.
Then why not
But-
invite
but-
these lawmakers who
but
maybe
it's not-
haven't beat the
but
gun
it's not-
lobby
it's
and
not-
say, this is how it's done?
But it's not his thing. It's actually fact. We saw he did that in the Senate during his Congress days, that he beat the gun lobby.
I'm agreeing
Look,
with
I
you
d-
that he has a lot of
Oh.
legislative experience. I'm asking why it is that you can say he wants to give these
do
negotiations.
you want to go to the beach with the president
Some-
tonight?
I
Is that
would-
what you're trying to tell me?
I would love to. The weather's
Look, I
not
do.
great.
Well, that touche on that. The weather, it is pouring outside like cats and dogs. It is not great.
But
Look,
if people
no.
are dying every day, why would
Absolutely.
this president then say he wants to give it some space and let somebody else?
But you're also
up-
going to hear, from the president tonight. And it's not that it's not that he hasn't been involved. He has been involved. I just listed out all the not conversations, but speeches that he's made. I just listed out the executive actions that he's taken. But I want to make sure that, that it is very clear that the president has indeed taken action. He cannot do it alone, so he's asking for Congress to act. The American public is going to hear from him tonight. I don't have any meetings to preview or to lay out for it. I'm not telling you it's not going to happen. I'm just saying I don't have anything to preview for you today.
And I get, you don't want to preview anything that's
Yeah.
in the text tonight, but what law could anybody, the president or anybody else, propose that would guarantee that somebody who really wants to get their hands on a gun can?
Well, they're having negotiations right now to talk through what the options are. Look, I mentioned the red flags, right? Red flag laws.
And-
If enacted, that actually we have seen across the country in different states where it has been helpful. But look, we are going to give them some space to see what they come up with. The president, the most important thing here is the president wants Congress to take action and to act.
But, okay, you got Chicago, for
Yeah.
example. They already have plenty of very strict gun laws, some of the strictest in the country. 47 people shot there over the Memorial Day weekend. 9 of them died. So which law would have prevented any of that?
All right, well,
Do we think that all these people in Chicago who are shooting each other are legally buying their guns?
so here's a couple of examples for you. I was just talking about the red flags law. There are some examples here of how they've prevented tragedies. In California, a study showed that California red flag law has assisted in the prevention of 21 mass shootings between 2016 and 2018. Florida, since passing a red flag law in 2018, there have been notable cases of the law intervening in multiple cases of potential violence. In Connecticut and Indiana, for every 10 to 20 preventions under the red flag laws, there was one fewer death than would otherwise have been expected. So when it enacted, it does help. There are things that we can do, and one of the things that the president talks about with expanding the background checks, if we're able to do that, we are going to take more guns out of the hands of criminals, and that is incredibly important. So there are things here that can be worked out, that can be done, that is not going to prevent every tragedy, but will take us to a better place so we can protect our families.
Okay, my last one would be, you guys at the White House had some very hard headlines this week about inflation and about baby formula. If there's nothing new that you can point to in this speech tonight, did you just schedule it to get people talking about something else?
People have died. People have died in the past couple of weeks in particular. We had 19 kids die in Uvalde just recently. A mass shooter came into their classroom and killed them, plus their 2 teachers. We had people doing everyday things on a Saturday, like some of us do, go to the grocery store, and 10 of them were murdered. Just last night in Tulsa, we're learning of people who were, again, killed. So this is not about politics. This is not about partisan politics here. This is something that he has worked on since he was a senator. This is very important and real for the president and for the grieving families that he has met with sadly, in the last 2 weeks. So this is an opportunity, again, to call for action, to get Congress to move. And, it is disheartening to hear that this could potentially, or if I'm hearing this right, could be used as a political tool, and that's not what this is. This is not about person. This is about people's lives.
Karine, what's the president's message to people living in violent neighborhoods
Just
who
to-
can't escape and
Go
can't
ahead,
wait
Ed.
for laws
Go ahead, Ed.
to...
To follow up on what Kelly was asking about regarding the baby formula shortage, you were asked earlier by a few people, I want to just ask this again with all due respect.
Yeah.
Were you able to speak with the president about when he was informed in April?
He talked about it himself. He said he was informed in April. So I don't think I need to, the president mentioned that, he said that, so I don't need to clear that up. You heard directly from the president on that.
I asked you at least, is you talked yesterday about February 17th and February 18th. And what we were trying to figure out is when exactly in April was he told? Was it April 1? Was it April 30th? Was it April 15th? Somewhere else in there?
I don't have a date to share with you. What I can tell you is he spoke to this yesterday, and he said it was in April. So that matters.
Take it down a level from him.
Okay, yeah.
Into the staff of the White House. And part of the reason there's so much curiosity about this across town is because, as you know, there have been stories written over the last several days and weeks about how things are going here in the West Wing, how things are operating. And so when we ask who was told, either by the FDA or the Department of Health and Human Services or the USDA here in the West Wing, who was told first? How did that get from that person eventually to the president? As completely understandable. There are thousands of things going on across the federal government today.
There are thousands of
But
things.
here's the issue.
We were just talking about gun
Something else
violence.
could prop up suddenly as an unforeseen crisis, like this one. And so we're trying to get a sense of how do things operate here inside the West Wing and how they eventually rise to the level of presidential involvement that then lead to things like invoking the Defense Production Act 4 or 5 months after the initial flags were raised.
So, Ed, the president was briefed through his regular channels, as he is briefed on countless priorities that the President of the United States has to deal with. There are countless issues, countless priorities that I talk about here all the time, every day, about different priorities that we have to deal with, whether it's the economy, whether it's COVID, whether it's climate change, whether it's foreign policy issues that we have to deal with and assess. That is how we run the White House. That's how any White House is run. So there are regular channels of White House senior staff, and that's how it gets elevated. You're asking me for a specific name. I am telling you how the process works, and I'm telling you how it goes from White House staff to regular channels to the president.
Part of why this is intriguing is because we know from what you've said, from what your colleagues have told us, from what we've learned in our reporting over the last year and a half, is that he's a voracious consumer of information from across the federal government, and whenever he gets briefed on something like this, he asks a lot of questions. And he usually puts it to the staff to come back with him with some solutions or some answers to these questions. So the idea that he was told about this in April, and then it didn't get elevated until mid-May, when Congress and when the press started raising bigger questions about this, begs the question of, well, then what happened in April when this very curious, very detail-oriented president in briefings would have been told about it, and when steps were taken that are now underway. That's part of what is so intriguing and curious about this situation, and why we're so desperate for information, because normally in these situations we're told, oh, well, here's what he wanted to know, and here's who he tasked with doing it. And we're not getting that this time.
No, look, we've laid out timelines over and over again.
Well, you gave us 2 dates.
Well,
And then tell us generally in April he was told about it.
okay, so by late, let me try again. Let's try this again. By late in April, sales were going down and shortages were appearing. So that is what we learned in late April. And since then, through May, across the administration, we've aggressively invoked the DPA and used it 3 times, as you just mentioned, and that's because of the president's leadership. Launched Operation Fly Formula, again, because of the president's leadership. Secured 80 million safe infant formula bottles from other countries, and cut red tape and issued WIC waivers in all 50 states. Because that's what happened in April that triggered our involvement in the way that we did throughout May in doing these 4 very specific things. Look, USDA, they took immediate action. But USDA and FDA cut red tape and increased supply. A reminder, there was more supply on the market after the recall than prior. That didn't happen by accident. So these actions were designed to bridge demand while Abbott worked through its safely open and manufacture a product that met FDA's gold standard. So they were acting at USDA, FDA were acting from the moment that the recall happened. But again, the sales were going down and shortages were appearing in late April, and that's when
That's what he was told?
well, he said in late April, right? And this is
He said April.
in April. I'm sorry, in April. Okay, he said in April, in early April. The point that I'm making is what we started to see in April were sales were going down and shortages were appearing. And when that happened, we triggered, the president made sure that the DPA happened, the Operation Fly formula happened, and that was our focus there. We wanted to make sure we got as much supply out as possible because, again, we saw the sales were going down.
The government totally sucks.